I'm going to kick off this next session by talking about clinical inertia in diabetes management. And this will be a mix of clinical as well as, I will say, philosophical and perhaps a little bit of business management also. It's not a core clinical talk. It's more of a mix of several ideas. Okay, so what is inertia basically, right? So we use this term very frequently in our practice. That is quite unfortunate because I think we should not be using the term inertia in medicine, but we do, right? And it comes from the Newton's first law of motion. That is, any object will stay at rest or will remain in its path or in its motion unless it is acted upon by something which stops its direction and flow. So this is like a patient with diabetes mellitus will continue to, if he's taking one drug, he'll continue to take that one drug for several years till he meets Dr. Rutul or till he meets Dr. Dharmendra or till he meets Dr. Nimi, and they change their management and add a second drug or add a third drug, right? So inertia is basically the patient continues to be in the same situation in which he or she has been for a long time till some doctor comes and changes the path. So we don't want our patients to be in a state of inertia. We want our patients to be more active, more proactive, and to manage their diabetes in a much more effective way. So let me start with what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 3 case studies, just like your business schools. There'll be 3 medical case studies and there'll be 3 non-medical case studies, right? So we'll start with a non-medical case study, and a lot of you, I'm sure, would be Apple fans in this audience. And the first case study is the study of the iPhone, right? And why you'd say, in insulin, we'll be talking about iPhone. Bear with me for a few minutes and you'll understand why. And the reason why we are discussing the iPhone is because we are going to discuss something about a guy called Steve Jobs. Now, fundamentally, if you talk to business analysts, if you talk to business experts, they'll tell you that Steve Jobs was a path breaker, not because he championed the cause of iPhone or he championed the cause of the iPod and so on, because fundamentally the way in which he dealt with business or the way in which he dealt with his customers was completely different from what others used to do. So most of the time, we are all taught, being Gujaratis, we are half businessmen anyways, right? So we've always been taught that, customer is the king, right? Je customer ke e sachu, right? Or whatever the customer says is right. Well, Steve Jobs for the first time said that no, customer is not always right. This is his quote. People don't know what they want until you show it to them. That's why I never rely on marketing research. Our task is to read things that are not yet on the page, right? So this is the fundamental philosophy of Steve Jobs. So Steve Jobs always said that people don't know what they want. People don't know anything, right? So if you see the iPhone also, if you see the iPhone 13, already Samsung is giving you folded phones. Other people are giving you 108 megapixel camera. But iPhone 13, which is more costly than any of these phones, doesn't give you a folded phone, doesn't give you 108 megapixel camera, it gives you 12 megapixel camera. Everybody gives you USB-C port, iPhone doesn't give you USB-C port. And yet, despite all that, iPhone is the most talked about phone. It is the most sold single individual branded phone. iPhone is the most sold phone worldwide. And iPhone is iconic, whereas all the other are just following it, right? The reason is that Steve Jobs' philosophy still lives on in Apple. And why this philosophy is very important for doctors to understand, because I often find doctors practicing what is known as patient-centric care. But then patient-centric care is often taken too far. Patient comes to you and says that I don't want insulin. Please don't give me insulin. And you say, okay, your HbA1c is 14. I will not give you insulin. I will give you oral antidiabetics, right? This is exactly the wrong way to practice medicine. Medicine should be practiced. Now, it may not be true for all businesses. Like, I can't tell a restaurant person to always do what they want and not listen to their customers, or I can't tell a shopkeeper not to listen to their customers, but I can always tell a doctor not to listen to their customers and listen to what is science and what is right. Because as a doctor, you have infinitely more knowledge about the practice of medicine than your patient does, and that is for sure. Maybe a chef knows more about cooking food, but you are the person who is eating it. So you can always say that no, I like my dal in this way, I like my paneer in this way. But as a doctor, the patient, it is your right, it is your duty to give the right care to the patient, irrespective of what the patient wants. And there is no patient in the world who will say that no, please give me insulin, please give me more medicines, please give me this, right? They will always say, nahi, insulin nahi chahiye, right? And it is your duty as a doctor to convince your patient, to tell your patient, to advise your patient the right therapy at the right time, right? And if you, again going back to what Steve Jobs says, your patient doesn't know much, right? It is your duty to give the right advice. And this is, if you follow this philosophy, I'll tell you, initially there will be lot of problems, but after a few years, in fact, patients will come to you, patients will respect you more, you will have more respect not only amongst your patients, but also amongst your own medical community. So that is a very important philosophy that you must understand. So now let's come to the first medical case study, right? So this is a Mr. ABC. He comes to me with history of weight loss, history of polyuria, history of polydipsia. His BMI is 34, but he's lost 10 kgs in the past 3 months. His random sugar, when checked in when he came to the clinic, was 344, and his HbA1c at the first time of presentation was 10.5%. Now this is the first time he's diagnosed to have diabetes. He does not have a past history of diabetes, but he has a very strong family history of diabetes. Both his parents are having diabetes mellitus, and this is what the patient comes to you in clinical presentation, right? So now you have 3 options for this patient. Either you start the patient on oral antidiabetics, or you will start the patient on oral antidiabetics with insulin, or you will start the patient on basal bolus insulin, right? Now, you see the patient's HbA1c, you see the patient's random sugar, you see the patient's symptoms, and all of this tells us that at this point of time, patient is having insulin deficiency. Now, it could be relative insulin deficiency, it could be a complete insulin deficiency, and that complete insulin deficiency is less likely because this patient is, obese, patient is more likely to be a type 2, right? So obviously you will check for ketones, you will check for other, possible signs of type 1 diabetes. But all in all, for this patient, the best therapy would be to start the patient on a basal insulin with oral antidiabetics, right? This is what, and when I do this, and this is often what I practice, and I tell my patients, look boss, you need to start insulin right away. Patients will come and say, sir, लेकिन मेरी तो शुरुआत ही हुई है डायबिटीज़ की, right? मुझे अभी से इंसुलिन की ज़रूरत है. The point is that, this is what I always counter my patients saying, that look, we always use the right therapy at the right time. There is no book in the world which says that insulin is the last resort, right? Insulin has to be used at the right strategic time. There will be a lot of patients who has diabetes since 20 years and will still not use insulin. And there will be a lot of patients who come for the first time and will use insulin. And a lot of these patients, when you start this patient on insulin, not only they'll have symptomatic benefit, there might be initial resistance, but they'll accept it. If you're convinced that the patient needs insulin, the patient will be convinced that the patient needs insulin. When you start the patient on insulin, the patient will actually have symptomatic benefit, and they'll in fact come back and tell you that I feel much better. And any doctor, no doctor would say that, no, I don't want you to feel better. I want you to feel worse, right? The patient will come and say that I feel better. The patient will regain some of the weight. The patient will have symptomatically better. And at that point of time, eventually, then you can taper off insulin and switch the patient only on oral antidiabetics. But at the same time, at this point of time, the patient has polyuria, polydipsia, he has osmotic symptoms, and the patient needs insulin, and insulin would be the right therapy. So when can you give insulin? This is a common myth, often amongst, not only amongst patients, but amongst doctors also. Insulin can be given in newly diagnosed patients who have osmotic symptoms. Insulin can be given with patients who are having secondary oral antidiabetic failure, right? So patient already on 4 or 5 oral antidiabetics, HbA1c is still very high. And it can also be given to patients with long-standing diabetes with complications. Unfortunately, the only time we use insulin in our practice, unfortunately, which is the reason why we talk about clinical inertia, is that we only give insulin to patients with long-term diabetes with complications. When they develop chronic kidney disease, when they develop retinopathy, when they are desperate, then we say that, look, I think you don't have any other option other than insulin. So instead of using insulin in a proactive, preventive manner, we tend to use insulin in a defensive, last option manner, which is, I think, the wrong way of practicing. And I think, the better served would be when we deal with insulin in a more effective and early and timely use of insulin, right? So to manage a patient with chronic disease, remember, you're not dealing with a patient who has a transient disease, right? You're not dealing with sardi khansi, you're not dealing with dengue, you're not dealing with malaria, you're not dealing with chikungunya, you're not dealing with COVID-19, you're dealing with a disease which is long term, right? The patient will be like your friend, will be like your family member. You have to think of this patient from a long term perspective instead of just thinking of this patient from a short term perspective. So let's look at the second non-medical case study. Okay, so this is something which I'll like to ask you: which asset class has given more consistent return over a long period of time, right? And if you see this chart, right, from 2018, 2019, 2020, and even years before that, 2008, 2010, 2011, most of the time, if you see almost 50% of the time in the past, 14 years, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 50% of the time, one asset class which has given consistently better, results has been gold, right? Despite having such a robust equity market, despite having a lot of other options for investment, if you see the data since the last 14 years, 50% of the time gold has been the one which has given the best return. That's why we use the term gold standard, right? Gold is one of the oldest form of investment, and despite years, I think since time when perhaps the concept of investment or concept of any money came into picture, gold was always there, right? So gold is perhaps the oldest form of currency, and yet at the same time gold continues to give you more return. In the same way, insulin is like gold. It is gold standard. Medications will come and go, medications will have their indications, but insulin has been around for more than 100 years, and it continues to be around even after 100 years. Even now, I challenge you, tell me one drug which is better than insulin, which is more effective than insulin, which is more robust than insulin, and you will not find one, right? Even your GLP analogs are not better than insulin. Insulin remains your gold standard, and that's why insulin can be used in any of the patient with or without any situation, any clinical situation. You can give it to pregnant women, you can give it to type 1 diabetes, you can give it to type 2 diabetes, you can give it to diabetes with renal failure, you can give it to diabetes with kidney failure, you can give it to almost every type of patient, you can give it to children, you can give it to elderly, all patients, and insulin remains the gold standard. So I think what we need to learn is that gold is gold, old is gold, right? And always remember that gold, there is nothing which can replace gold, right? No asset class can replace gold, and insulin is like gold. No drug will replace insulin in its own thing, right? Let's look at the second medical case study. This is another patient, young male, strong family history of diabetes, again HbA1c of BMI of 34. He was diagnosed to have diabetes 4 years back. Now he's currently on triple combinations. He's on a glimepiride, metformin, pioglitazone 3 times a day. So he's taking 45 milligram of pioglitazone, 6 milligram of glimepiride, and 1.5 gram of metformin with vildagliptin with voglibose. His HbA1c is still 8.9. What is the next step, right? A lot of you will say, we'll give him SGLT2. He's obese, type 2, why not? But my answer is, how many more oral drugs will we add, right? Yes, you will give this patient SGLT2, but patient is already on 3 plus 4 plus 2. So 5 oral anti-diabetic drugs, almost on maximum doses of all of them, right? And yet the patient's diabetes is not controlled. I think, there's this, saying by Albert Einstein, insanity is basically doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. So this is what exactly, to give this patient another oral anti-diabetic will be close to insanity, right? So I think we need to look at diabetes in a more robust way. We need to see it in a more broad way. And again, remember that patient eventually has decline of functional beta cell mass, and insulin is something which we need to really look at, right? Let's look at the third and the last non-medical case, the wine industry, right? If you look at the wine industry, it is considered industry of snobs, right? Wine industry has always said that I don't care what the customer says. We will always produce the best wine and we'll give it to the customer and we'll charge an astronomical sum for that, and people will still take it, right? And same way, the medical industry needs to be more like the wine industry. Not that, we need to consume more of it, but the idea is that we need to always tell our patients that, look, no matter what you want, at the end of the day, we'll always practice the right thing, and we'll charge you good money for it, and at the same time, we'll be happy, right? So I'll quickly wrap up, right? Unfortunately, I have another talk to be at, right? So just some take-home messages. Remember, newly diagnosed patient with osmotic symptoms, you should start insulin. Patients on multiple oral antidiabetics with poor glycemic control, you should start insulin. Long-standing diabetes with uncontrolled diabetes with multiple microvascular complications, start insulin, right? And give a prescription based on what patient needs rather than what patient wants. And finally, reduce the friction in your practice, right? It would be a good idea to practice ethical, good medicine. So thank you. I'll have to unfortunately leave for another talk almost ASAP, right? So I'll come back for the discussion, and I'll see you there. Thank you.